Hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of Stock Picking with Financial Missy and me, the trade engineer. Hello everyone. Yep. So sorry for the delay. We are a bit late. Yeah. But hopefully, you didn't wait long as a result. Yep. So today, we'll be talking about another US stock, right? So I actually put up the slides down here, right? So it's actually an EV company, right? So when you talk about EV, electric vehicles, the first thing that comes to mind will be Tesla, right? Because that is like the most famous and the most popular stock that is associated with electric vehicles, right? But do you know, right, there is actually other companies that are also doing electric vehicles, right? And today we'll be talking about another company, right, that could be seen as growing. Yeah. So the question here, right, is whether this company is actually better than Tesla, right, and whether it will poise for further growth, right? So today, I'll be kickstarting this session before Financial Missy will delve into the fundamental details of this company, right? So without further ado, let me start the session today. Yeah, but if you're live here with me, right, just give this video a thumbs up, right? Give it a like so that we know that you are here live with us, right? So just click the thumbs up button, right? And yep, then we'll proceed, right, with this session. Okay. Yep. So before I move on, right, to the stock for today, right, let me first do a quick recap, right, as always, of the previous stock that we highlighted last week in our previous video, right. So if you have not caught that video, right, do watch that video. It's hosted by on Financial Missy's Facebook page last week, and it's this stock called Illumina, right. So I actually attached the link to last week's video in the description box, right? So you can check it out if you haven't already seen it already. Right. So let's quickly do a quick analysis, right? So this was what was shown last week for Illumina, right? Ticker symbol ILMN, right? So at that time, this chart was shown, right? This was a daily chart shown last week, right? With the downward sloping downtrend line, as well as the RSI and the MACD being shown over here, right? So at that time, it was still trading below this downtrend line, right? But we did see some, signs of bottoming, right? Because basically you're forming a lower price, a lower low, but RSI was forming a slightly higher high, right? And we also showed the hourly chart last week, right? So this is on the hourly chart, right? And the same thing was, same conclusion could be derived, right? It's still trading below this downward sloping downtrend line, and there is some indication of a bullish divergence, right, over here with the RSI forming higher lows and the price forming a lower low. Right, so that was what was concluded last week, right? There was this bullish divergence. The hourly MACD was positive, but the daily MACD was negative, right? So there was on the other bull side, right? There was this the price was forming a higher high on the hourly time frame, on a shorter time frame. Yeah, but we still couldn't, get past that downtrend line, right? So that is still that major resistance level, right? So at that time, right, what do we conclude, right? We concluded, right, that we should actually wait and see, right, to actually wait for the stock price to actually cross that downtrend line first, right, before doing any long trades, right? So what happened ever since, right? So this is an updated daily chart, right, for Illumina. So you can see, right, some positive signs, right? It actually crossed this downtrend line, right? So it didn't cross it very convincingly, but at least it's staying above for now, right? But the past few days have been a red candle, so that's something not very convincing to us, right? But nevertheless, it crossed this downtrend line, right? And now, currently testing this horizontal support level, right? In fact, the last trading day on Friday, it is just touching this horizontal support level, right? And it's also, right, testing this uptrend line, right, that I drawn over here. On another positive sign, right, is that the daily MACD has now turned positive, right? Previously it was negative, but now it has turned positive. So there was a positive crossover, right? That basically this shows that there is some bullish indication. And then, let's look at the hourly chart, right? Since we looked at the hourly chart last week, right? Okay, but on the hourly chart, right, you look at this shorter term basis, right, there are some signs of danger, right? So it's shown in orange down here, right? So, one thing we are seeing now, right, is in recent times is that there are lower lows for the price, that in recent times, it has actually broken below, previously, you're forming a bit of higher lows here. Then now it's actually forming a bit of a lower low, right? So that's a slight danger, but we have to wait and see what actually transpires in the next week. And in the shorter term as well, on hourly time scale, the hourly MACD has just turned negative as well, right? So actually, on the shorter term basis, it's a bit more bearish now, but on the longer term basis, on a daily basis, it is a bit more bullish. Right, so what can we conclude from all these, right, that I've shared? So in conclusion, right, on the longer term daily time scale, right, it is looking a bit bullish, right? But we do have to take note that on the shorter time scale, on the hourly basis, right, there is some bearish indications. So we do have to watch out to see whether these bearish indications actually become even more bearish, right, in the future. Right, so what are the things we need to take note of? I think first of all, we need to take note to see whether the price can be supported, right? So, it is whether it can actually stay above this downtrend line, right? So actually it crossed it, not very convincingly, but it did cross it. It's now currently trading above this downtrend line. So it has to stay above this downtrend line, right? For it to see some bullish momentum. And also, right, it has to bounce off that horizontal support and uptrend line, right? This horizontal support line as well as the uptrend line, right? So it is now, both close to it, right? It's actually touching this uptrend line, and this horizontal support is actually very close to this line, right? So we do have to watch out to see whether it can bounce off convincingly from this support, right? So if not, right, we actually should wait and see, right? Hold your horses. Don't rush in to enter this trade, right? And if you already entered because you actually saw that it crossed the downtrend line, right? You should set a cut loss, right? And if it actually, breaks below this support or the uptrend line, right, very convincingly, then you probably should, cut loss to play safe. Yeah, so that's my suggestion. But of course, in these volatile times, as always, please do your own due diligence. Is very volatile recently with the Russia and Ukraine war, so anything can happen, right? So do keep a close watch out if you are doing trading or investing. Right, so there's a quick recap of Illumina, and just to highlight here, right? If you have been liking or sharing so far, right? Please don't forget to click that like button or click that love button, right? So that we know that you like our video and we can do and create more of this such content for you next time. Right, so without further ado, right, let's move on to today's stock pick, right? So I haven't reviewed the name of the company, but I think probably you have some idea, right? It is none other than NIO, right? So actually, this company was requested, right, in last week by someone called Kel Pang. Thanks, Kel, for suggesting that this stock. Yep. So today we'll be doing this analysis for NIO, right? So I just pulled up this price chart for NIO, this overall price chart, right, on a daily time frame. So you give a holistic view of how NIO have been performing so far since I think 2020, yep, to now, yep. So right, it actually climbed quite a fair bit, right, and essentially it hit the peak, right, on 11 Jan 2021 at about $67, right. Yeah, ever since then, ever since it hit the peak, right, it has actually fallen off quite tremendously, right. So as of now, about slightly over 1 year later, right, on 5th of March, right, it's now trading at $18.60, right, 18.6. So we work out the math, right, that is equivalent to about 72% drop. So that's a very substantial drop, right? And the question here again is why? Why did this occur, right? I mean, it's such a big percentage drop. There should be some reasons behind that, right? So let's quickly delve into some of the news, right, that could have spurred, this price movement, right? So over here I have one article taken from Forbes, right, quite recently, right? So basically, it is mentioning, right, that this new company called NIO, right, it's actually a Chinese electric vehicle company, right? So it's actually impacted, it's considered as a growth stock, and in recent times, all the growth stock has been selling off, right? So NIO being a growth stock itself is also not spared, right? And it's also selling off at the same time, right? And the whole macroeconomic outlook, right? There is this concern of higher interest rates and tighter monetary policy, right? So that impacted all stocks, right? And NIO is also not spared as well. And because this company is a Chinese affiliated stock, right? So there is a crackdown, right, on Chinese companies that are listed in US. So it's also impacted as a result of that, right? Because there is some concern whether this crackdown will actually impact this company as well, right? So there's some reasons that was cited, and there's another article from Fu.com, right? It also offers more insights onto what happened, right? So in this article, basically on this particular day, right, they actually the Chinese Financial Ministry, right, actually announced some steep cuts, right, in some subsidy scrapping, right, of buyers of new electric vehicles, right. So they actually mentioned that you might be cut by 30% and might be stopped altogether after the end of this year. So all these are very negative news. So as a result, some sellers came in to sell this stock off, right? There's a third article here, right, on balance.com, right? They also cited that it could be because NIO is overvalued, right? It has risen quite a fair bit, and it has reached overvalued levels, right? So it's just finding back equilibrium, right? It's going back to where it should be valued at, right? So that is something that they attributed to, as well as the same reason of rising interest rates, right? So that actually cooled off some sentiment for growth companies. Right, and there are other articles, right, that also mentioned that this company might be losing the race, right, among all the other different companies out there for EV, right? Actually this company has already fallen, right, to 4th place in the Chinese EV industry, and recent deliveries has also slowed down, right? It also the delivery growth rate has slowed significantly month on month, so that also gives some concerns, right, whether this NIO stock can indeed continue to grow strongly in future, right? So there are also articles that say that basically, yep, it's slowing, the growth is slowing, competitors are overtaking it, and their valuation has to be repriced, right? They have to reprice the valuation because they factor in that this company might be slowing down its growth, and the price will also re-equilibrate to basically better defend, or to basically find a better valuation point for this company. Right. So these are some of the news that basically are quite negative for NIO. But of course, on the positive side of things, there are catalysts, for NIO as well. Right. There's a flip side of it. Right. So this article also from Forbes, right? It has given a flip side story, right, on NIO. Right. So actually, it felt that the valuation now currently, because it has fallen quite a fair bit, so actually for now it looks quite attractive, right? So it depends on what you project, right? So this is what they project they project that it's actually only trading at 4 times the 2022 revenue, and it's projected to even grow the revenue even grow right more strongly, right? And there are some exciting lineup for this year, right? They are going to introduce more vehicles to compete, in the EV market, right? There is the ET7 full-size sedan, right? There's an ET5 compact sedan, and more such models that be in the pipeline, right? And they are also increasing the production capacity, right, to meet the demand, the expected demand, and even said that it's currently loss making, but it might be inching towards profitability, right, with economies of scales improving. Yep. So this is the flip side of the story, right? That it could or could not materialize in future, but these are some things that you could look out for if you're thinking of longing NIO in the future, right? Because all these could actually bring the price up in the near future. Right. Then other articles, right? This is taken from Yahoo, right? So actually, also it also forecasted that NIO delivery might accelerate. Yeah, even though the previous article said that it has dropped, but it might pick up in future, right? They cited some statistics here, right? And they also cited some numbers here that seem to show that it might be improving. Yeah, right. And there are more models, as what I mentioned in the previous article, more models coming out, and production capacity is also increasing, right? And they're also bringing it to more markets, right, including Germany, Netherlands, Sweden, and Denmark, right? So all these are some catalysts that might be coming in time, right? And the same article, right, it's also forecasting more growth, right, in terms of revenue growth, right? And there is this highlight here, right, that with everybody going clean and green, right? China is no exception as well, right? So they will also try to go clean and green and want to slash that exhaust emission or reduce the dependence on oil imports, right? So so this might be the catalyst for this company, right? It might not be the biggest EV company now in China, but it might benefit, in time to come with countries going clean and green, including China, right? So these are just some news article, right? You could Google more to get some further background on NIO. Yep. So this is just some articles I picked just to share, but the question here, right, as always, is what's the future direction for NIO? And to do that, being the trader myself, I will look into the technical analysis, right? But before I delve into that, yes, just a quick note here. Please like and love this video if you love our sharing so far. And without further ado, right, let's jump into the price chart to see what is the details for this stock, right? So here you have NIO, right? So NIO, basically I zoom in this on daily chart, right? And I zoom into the more recent times, right? So you can see down here, I have two different lines, right? I have the downward sloping downtrend line, as well as the horizontal support level, right? And I also, basically have the RSI as well as the MACD over here. So what you can first see, right, is that this stock is still trading below this downtrend line, right? So it still hasn't broken out this downtrend line, right? So it's still on a downtrend, right? So that's something we have to take note of, right? Whether it can eventually break out of this and form higher highs in the price is still unknown, right? At the moment, it's still in the downtrend, right? And now it's currently touching this horizontal support, right? It's testing the horizontal support, which was tested once in the past. It has tested again on Friday, right? So we currently do not know whether this support level is strong enough, whether this can hold. So we shall see, next week how the prices transpire, right? So if it breaks below this support, then we might be searching for the next support level again. Yep. And some other bearish signs is also the MACD, right? It's also negative recently, right? And it doesn't seem like it's going to cross over yet, Yeah, in fact, the gap is slightly widening, right? So that's something to take note as well. But on the bull side, right, on the bullish side of things, right, there is some form of bullish divergence. It's not very strong, but it looks there's some slight bullish divergence. So you can see that the price formed a lower low here, but the higher low for the RSI, right? So there's some slight bullish divergence over here. Additionally, right, it's also formed a double bottom, right? This is the first bottom and the second bottom, right? So that is also a sign that, you know, prices could be bottoming out, but we are not sure yet. It really depends on whether this support can hold, right? So that's basically the conclusion here I have for you. Basically, it's we have to wait and see whether this support level actually remains supported, and know whether this downward sloping downtrend line can be broken, you know, in time to come. Right. So let me go back to the slides, right, and give a quick summary, right, of what I've discussed just now. Right. So on the bullish side of things, right, we saw that bullish divergence, right, where price make a lower low, but RSI make a higher low, right? And it was a double bottom recently, right? But no, all this really depends on that horizontal support, whether that horizontal support is strong enough to hold the price and provide adequate support. Right, but you know, on the bearish side of things, right, it's still downward sloping, it's still in a downtrend, right? So it remains to be seen whether this downtrend line can be broken in time to come, right? And that horizontal support level, as I mentioned, we need to watch out for that very closely, right? And the MACD is, you know, recently negative, and there's, you know, the gap is slightly widening, right? So we have to see a crossover before we can, you know, turn bullish. And as always, right, the overall market sentiment, right, is still volatile with the Russia-Ukraine war still ongoing. Yep, and you know, the interest rates, the Fed, it's still, you know, up in the air, right? So all these are some things you have to take note of as well. So what should we do for trading, right? What is my suggestion, right? So what I suggest, right, is actually to wait and see first, right? In fact, you know, what we drawn just now with that downward sloping downtrend line, as well as the horizontal support, that actually forms a descending triangle pattern, right? So you can Google what's the descending triangle pattern, right? But basically, right, basically how it forms is with that downtrend line and that support line, right? So it could be bullish, it could be bearish. We have to see which comes first, right? So if it breaks above that downtrend line and the MACD turns positive, right, we could turn bullish for this stock and we could enter a long position. But on the other hand, right, if it breaks, you know, below that support line convincingly, right, if you are thinking of turning long, maybe you should wait, right? Or if you're actually a short trader, right, you could try to enter a short position. But of course, this is only if you're a trader, right? It might be quite risky because it's actually dropped quite a fair bit already. Yeah, so there might be limited room to go down further. Yep. And as always, right, as what I mentioned earlier, right, we do have to check that macroeconomic outlook, right, before entering. Yep, because with the volatile market nowadays, we have to be mindful. Any sudden news might, you know, skew the market, right? And as we always stress time and again, every week, please do your own due diligence, especially in these volatile times. Right. So just some reminders here, as always, every week. So yeah, if you have liked my sharing so far, right, don't forget to, you know, click the like or the love button and share this video, right, so that more people can benefit from our sharing. Right, so you can also follow us on our social media pages, right, if you haven't already. Yep, so I have my Facebook page, Instagram, and Twitter pages, right? FINANCIALMissy has hers, right, on Facebook and Instagram. Yep, and, you know, do leave a comment right below on what you think about sharing, you know, as well as perhaps leave, you know, a suggestion, right, for what's the next stock. Yeah, what Kelpang did last week, right? Thanks, Kelpang. So do leave a comment down below on what's the next stock you'd like us to share next week, right? So we share this stock. We do stock picking for US stocks every week, every Sunday at 4 p.m. So next week will be on FINANCIALMissy's Facebook page. And yep, last but not least, right? Just a shout out here as well. I'll be doing another crypto watch streaming, right? On the Finance SG investor page, right? This evening, right, at 9:30 p.m., right, on Facebook Live as well. So today I'll be covering on a coin, right? Particular coin that might be the next Bitcoin, right? So if you're interested to find out what this coin is, right, don't forget to tune in later at 9:30 p.m. Yep, and with that, I'll hand the time over to FINANCIALMissy, who will be delving into the fundamental details of NEO. Over to you, FINANCIALMissy.
Yo guys, thank you for having me today. It's been really, really very exciting, and I think it's been a very long time since I'm able to unmask myself and talk in confidence, isn't it? The whole situation of COVID in Singapore is pretty bad. So I guess being the financial missy part of me, the missy part of me has been pretty much engaged in the healthcare setting. So hence, I'm glad that I have the time to actually speak to you guys in comfort today to analyze this particular stock called NEO. So if you guys are still with me, please like the live and comment in the chat says yay, right? So just to see whether you guys are still here and stuff. Awesome. Okay, cool. So without further delay, just let me go deep into the fundamental analysis for Neo itself. It's been very exciting when I was actually reading it. I was just thinking about it myself. Like I just reading the news about Ukraine earlier this afternoon. Before I was just preparing about this webinar, and I was like, wow, Ukraine's president actually thanked Tesla for, not thank Tesla, thank Elon Musk for actually donating the satellite such that can help to build up the communication in Ukraine itself in the destroyed city. So I was like, yeah, Tesla is able to do it. Apart from Tesla, what other companies in the world is able to provide such a support? And I was like, wow, I have only heard about Tesla, supplying the satellites and stuff like that. But what about the rest? If you're talking about, new, whether it's a substitute for Tesla, or will new be the next Tesla? I guess the answer is actually very straightforward. New will have a very long, long way to go. I mean, what other companies have that scale of Tesla, right? Okay, so without further ado, let me just share my screen. Here we go. Okay. Right, so let me just clear it. Okay, cool. So today, talking about NEO, very excitingly, on Friday itself, this particular stock only worth $18.63. It's actually quite a significant dip, from its high in 2020, 2021. It's a very steep decline. So what is happening with this particular stock in essence? Okay, before we go into the stock itself, let's look at microeconomy, like what the trade engineer actually suggested earlier. We always need to know what is the economy doing, how is the economy embracing itself for further impact of what's happening. In the macroeconomy sense, we know that Omicron is something in the past. I've been talking about it over and over again. But I mean, although the virus is still there, but people have already moved on to, the focus is actually on two things: interest rate hike, of which, on Friday itself, because of what Powell said. Powell actually mentioned that despite the ongoing Ukraine-Russia war, the Fed is still on the road on a still stands on the decision to increase the interest rate. Hence, the market actually had a dip on Friday itself. The general market was in rates, man. So interest rate hike is actually something of focus right now, and also the Ukraine-Russia war that is going to affect our supply chain deficit and also our environmental sustainability. So why do I add on the environment sustainability? Right, it's because NEO itself, it works on this thing called clean energy. It wants people to move away from the traditional gas, petroleum kind of vehicle to something that's of clean energy, sustainable. So when we need to consider the impact of NEO in the near future, of which how far this company is able to actually help in our environment, because it's our focus moving ahead as well, right? So let's look at the indicators for the past 1 year. Wow, this is a chart of S&P 500. You've seen that it's up and down and down. So one takeaway that you guys can actually get from this chart is the market doesn't move in a straight line. Yeah, it's always up and down, up and down. So embrace yourself for ups, embrace yourself for downs. Of course, you can do dollar cost averaging when the market is going down, but please, always look at this thing called momentum. Play along the momentum. If the momentum is going downtrend, unless you have a lot of money, your portfolio is super big that you can dollar cost average all the way down. If otherwise, I would highly suggest you guys to wait for a change in trend before you guys actually goes in. Because what goes down will go further down. What goes up will go higher up, right? So let's look at it. For the past few weeks, or rather since January, right, this year, the market is actually on a downtrend. It's a very obvious downtrend. Okay, if by looking at the black color lines, but let's look at the medium to long term trend, the purple and blue lines. Simple moving average 50, 150. Last week I mentioned that there's actually a narrowing, right? There was still a gap, but it was narrowing. But today, when we look at it again, it's already reached already. Is it going to cross over? I don't know. Nobody would know. So we need to see how the market actually responds to the whole situation. But yes, that might be an increasing chance of it to cross over if, let's say, the situation in Russia escalates, or the market doesn't respond well to what the Fed actually will be suggesting for the interest rate hike. So for you guys out there, please be more aware of what's going on right now and do your own due diligence of what you are going to do with your existing portfolio, or if you guys are thinking of catching the bottoms, right? Let us see on Friday itself. As mentioned, on Friday itself, there's a huge dip because of what Powell actually mentioned regarding the interest rate hike. So we really do not know what is actually going on. But nevertheless, you also see that the positioning of the candlestick on Friday itself, right, it's actually very close to the resistance line. So is it going to break through the resistance line, or is it going to go downwards? I leave it to your own discretion, but I think it's for now, the prediction, the anticipation of how is the market going to react is actually quite obvious. All right. So let's see what is NIO doing. Okay, NIO itself, right, designs, develops, manufactures, and sells smart electrical vehicles in China. And I underline the word China because China itself is a very big market. But China market, as compared to the whole world, is just one market. So what is the future of NIO if it's just in China? There's certainly there's growth potential, but to what extent? That's a question we need to ask ourselves here. And also when it comes to China, right, there's a lot of different regulations, and imposing of taxes and everything. Like what the trade engineer actually mentioned just now. So for you guys actually who are looking at China stocks, please be very aware of the regulations in China and China government, and be very safe in terms of your decision on whether you guys are actually confident in investing this stock, right? How is it doing financially? Let's look at three things: the income statement, the balance sheet, and the cash flow statement. Okay. New itself has been a company for a very long time. Only in 2017, 2017, it changed its name to become New. So when we look at it, right, the financial statement itself, interestingly, right, the year-on-year total revenue of Neo has been increasing. Awesome. But then the net income is actually still deficit, which means to say this company is still not profiting after so long. Okay. In terms of balance sheet wise, current ratio more than one, which is good. Debt to equity ratio less than one, which is good. Price to book ratio, according to the report, is 7.85. Just means that this company might be a bit overvalued. All right. Looking at the cash flow statement, I wouldn't be surprised that the cash flow from operation has been negative all along. Everything has been negative all along. But in 2020, there's a sudden increment, sudden positivity. Why? because 2020 is where the hype came and all the investors, retail investors and whoever actually take opportunity in it. So I'm not surprised that the cash from financial, and the sales of this particular company in 2020 is really that good. However, the free cash flow for the longest time is still negative. So am I really convinced by this fundamentals of new itself? Currently for me, I am not very convinced in terms of fundamental. Would I prefer Tesla over Neo for a good reason? For a very good reason is definitely right. But is it a good valuation? Is it worth entering Neo? Unfortunately, I've been trying to actually calculate the intrinsic value of this particular company, but because of the cash flow is actually negative, and using the intrinsic value calculation that I actually used, I am not able to calculate a intrinsic value for this particular company. Unfortunately, you guys can try googling. Some website actually mentioned the cash flow is about 20 odd, about 20.75. But however, for myself, I would feel that currently there is no valuation for cash flow. I mean for Neo itself. Is it a good time to enter? You guys can think about entering by all means, through technical analysis, of course. But nevertheless, just look at this particular chart, right? There's actually three issues that you can actually see from this chart itself. The first one is short term, medium term, long term trend is actually on a downward trend. It's very bearish. So for investors out there, I would highly suggest for you to keep out of this particular stock right now. For traders who actually wants to actually play according to the momentum of the short term momentum of the stock, if you dissect into the 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, 4 hour, or even the daily trending, you guys can, but please be aware that the currently on Friday itself when it closed, right, it's actually more than 50% towards the resistance line, which means to say it's very close to the resistance line. The risk to reward ratio is actually very low. You might want to actually consider waiting it for to short it at the resistance line, or actually to long it at the support line and do a very short term trading methodology. If otherwise, on Friday itself, right, or rather for the past few months, the candlesticks, if you can zoom into the chart and look at the candlesticks, right, the candlesticks bar is mostly red and it's a thick red. Look at the green compared to the green and the red. There are more red than greens. So in terms of the part, in terms of trending wise, I think this particular stock has a very strong momentum of downwards trend rather than any rebound in the near future. However, if I pull the chart a bit longer to a 5 years chart, right, actually I myself I actually feel that this particular stock has a potential to retrace at about $11 thereabout. So there's still way to go. I might not be right. I might be right. I might be wrong. Highly likely, I'm wrong because I'm not God. I cannot predict the future of this particular stock. But I feel that there's a potential of it. So for you guys out there who actually has this firm conviction about investing in Neo itself, do keep a lookout and see whether there's any rebound, any reversal in trend. If otherwise, a good value that you guys can consider going in can be about $11 thereabout. So it's for your consideration. Please do your own due diligence on what is right, what is wrong, and which strategy suits yourself, right? So if you guys actually understands me, please just comment the chat says maybe a yes, yes, why? Yes for yes, you understood me. Please do your own due diligence to see what is your conviction. It's something that's very important that I cannot stress further. All right. So that is all about my sharing. Yep.
All right. Thanks, Financial Missy, for your great sharing on Neo. Right. So, yeah, if anyone is thinking of longing Neo, do take note that it is still on the downtrend, right? So, any reversal might not be imminent, right? So, yeah. So do your own due diligence, right? And wait for a strong indication before actually longing or buying this stock. Yep. So, and as always, right, these times is very volatile, right? So that's why we have been sharing the macroeconomic outlook as well. And that's why Financial Missy has been, taking the time every week to share with all of you on what's the macroeconomy, right? So, so do watch out, do stay cautious in this time, and do be safe. Don't want to lose your hard-earned money during this period of volatility, right? And just yep, thanks for the like. Yep, I saw that like. Thanks for the like. Yep, and just a reminder here again, once again, if you like our sharing, yep, do click the like button or the love button, right? And do comment on what's the next stock you would like us to share next week, right? And we can share it in the next session, right, at the same time at 4 p.m. next week, right? So if no one has any more questions, right, we shall end the session for today and hope to see you again next week at the same time, 4 p.m. Yep, see you all then on Financial Missy's page.
See you guys there.
Bye bye.
Bye.